Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 901B, and today's date is February 23rd, 2016, and the title of the episode is U.S. Buying Time with the Current Peace Deal to Plan the Next Move in Syria. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, we realize that the government and the agencies, they work for corporate interests. They don't work for the people. They're not protecting the people in any way. A lot of people believe that these agencies are there to protect the people. No, they're really there to protect corporations and to do what corporations want. Because we have to realize that the alternative media continually push the idea and use critical thinking and report on information that the corporate media likes to stay away from. For example, Monsanto. Now we know they create genetically modified food. Now I'm a health nut. I do not like GMO food. I stay away from it as best I possibly can. I like eating organic. I like actually creating my own foods. I don't like chemicals in my food. I like to read labels. Mostly I stay away from boxes, or anything like that. And we realize that a lot of our food has a lot of chemicals and poisons that are intertwined into the food system. And actually most of the food is not even food, it's chemical makeups to make us think that we're eating food. But we know that Monsanto, they genetically alter the DNA structure of plants, and they introduced glyphosate into the food system, which is a herbicide to basically, keep the bugs off the plant. Now, they take that food, they feed it to animals, they harvest that food, they feed it to humans, and the meat that we get from the animals, the crops that we get from this, we're eating poison. Now, the FDA, the Environmental Protection Agency, especially the Environmental Protection Agency, they went on record saying that glyphosate, it does not cause cancer. Now, out in Europe, they've run tests and they said, yes, glyphosate links to cancer. Now, remember, all these agencies, they're not working for the people. So why all of a sudden is the FDA now looking into glyphosate? What's changed? Well, it was because of public pressure. A lot of people were stepping up saying that there needs to be a study done on glyphosate. So the FDA said, okay, well, we're being forced to do this. We need to do this. And they're looking at this and saying, okay, yeah, that this is probably a public health threat. This is not good for you. So it wasn't the government that stepped up and took care of the people. It was the people that forced the government to step up. And this is how we create change down the road. It wasn't done by force. It was people finally putting their foot down and saying, you know what, enough's enough. This is why we need all of our food labeled. This is why we need to know where it's from. Because whatever I'm putting in my body, whatever you're putting in your body, you should know where it's from, what's in there, what chemicals are used, are they genetically modified? Because without that, you don't have the freedom to choose. And if you truly want freedom, that choice of choosing what food you want, the only way to make that choice is to understand what it is. But of course, the corporations, they don't want you to have a choice. They want you filled with poisons and chemicals, because then you have to go to the doctor. Then Big Pharma gets involved, and the system goes around and around, and Obamacare gets more taxes. The health insurance pays out nothing. More people need Obamacare because they feel sick and they get scared. And this thing just goes around and around and around. And who suffers for it? The people once again. Now, out in Sandy Hook, which we know was a false flag, from all the evidence that we've gathered, from all the alternative media and everything that we see, the whole thing was a hoax. But it looks like the government is still trying to push the idea that gun manufacturers should be held accountable for someone using a weapon to commit a murder. So the families and a teacher who survived the attack argued the rifle is a lethal military weapon that should not be sold to the public, and they want an exception to the law. The families are suing the Freedom Group, the parent company of Bushmaster Firearms, which produced the rifle, as well as Cam4 and Firearms Distributor and Riverview Gun Sales, the store where the gun was purchased. So they're trying to push this idea, and of course the gun company is trying to get this completely dismissed, that, they should be held accountable for what has happened. That's like blaming the car manufacturer for your accident. Now, if the car has some type of problem that came from the manufacturer and the car was brand new, and they found out it was faulty in all the cars, that's a different story. Because the car was not functioning properly. But if someone just gets into an accident, it's the person who is driving the car who should be sued. Same thing with the person owning or using a weapon. A weapon, or any object, is an inanimate object, like a sword, an axe, a machete. And you can see the agenda here. They're trying to get gun companies not to produce these type of weapons. This is the agenda. Because this way the companies can say, okay, listen, if we're going to get sued over these type of weapons, and this is the exception to the rule, then we're not going to produce it. Now, do I think this is going to work? Absolutely not. I think this is a dead end. They're trying to ban this weapon. They're doing whatever they possibly can to push the agenda, to disarm the American people, and it's just not going to work. Remember, we still have the Second Amendment, which allows us to bear arms equal to or greater than the armed forces. That's what the Second Amendment states. Now, out in Norway, because of the refugee problem, Norway is saying that they're ready to abandon the Geneva Convention if Sweden collapses. The border will be closed by force. The Swedish refugees will be rejected without possibility to seek asylum. And they're saying they're prepared for the worst. We're seeing the situation throughout Europe is getting worse. The U.S. right now, they are sending 5,000 tons of ammunition to Germany, and it will be placed in the Army Depot in Germany because of increased military activity by Russia. And you can see what they're doing right now. They're using any excuse to move military assets into position. Now, Russia wants to fly over the United States and use surveillance cameras to take pictures over the U.S. Now, everyone's coming out of the corporate media. Everyone's like, oh my God, Russia's going to fly over the United States. We can't let this happen. Well, we have to remember, U.S. and Russia signed the Open Skies Treaty back in 2002, which allows each country to fly over and take pictures. But the U.S. is making a very big deal about this because Russia wants to use a digital camera. And they're saying, well, I don't know, is the digital camera included in the treaty? Well, the treaty really doesn't say much about what type of camera, if it's digital or analog or anything like that. But it looks like the U.S. is trying to back out of this. Now, the U.S. flew over Russia many, many times during Ukraine, the coup d'etat, when NATO and the U.S. were using all the propaganda to say Russia was invading. Many times I reported that Ukraine, Turkey, the U.S., Poland, Germany, all flew over Russia to see if there were troops there. And every single time, there was no troops whatsoever. Now, of course, this was not reported in the corporate media because they didn't want you to know that part. But this is done time and time again because the treaties are signed and they have the ability to fly over the countries. But it looks like the U.S. is trying to back out of this, and the corporate media is trying to make a really big deal that Russia is going to be flying over the United States taking pictures. But they've been doing this since 2002. Now, out in Ukraine, we're seeing more and more strange things. The Ukrainian government is working on extra security at the administration buildings. Now, we know there's protests going on. There are clashes with police that are going on now in Ukraine. The people are very upset with their puppet government. And we see this in Yemen, we see it in Libya, we see it in Lebanon, we see it in Iraq. And every time the U.S. puts a puppet government in power, the people seem to always suffer. But what's very interesting is that motorcades are being reinforced with armed men. We see government buildings being reinforced. And they're also building an underground tunnel system, a network. So the cabinet of ministers have the ability to escape at a moment's notice. And this is very interesting. Now, are they very nervous about the people rising up and pushing people out of office and they want to escape very quickly? Are they nervous that if they start this offensive, that they're going to have to escape very quickly? But we're starting to see a lot of strange things occur in Ukraine. We even have Obama out there telling Putin, Ukraine peace deal must be respected. Now, he was talking to Vladimir Putin, and he's telling the person who created the Minsk II ceasefire, because the U.S. didn't do it, the U.S. didn't want peace, the U.S. didn't want a ceasefire, the U.S. wasn't even involved, that Russia has to uphold its side. Now, Russia has upheld its side. Kiev has not. And if you notice, every single time the U.S. comes out and says something, they never say anything about Kiev not doing what they're supposed to be doing in the Minsk II ceasefire. And that is allowing and changing the Constitution and allowing elections and the southeastern section to be separate and apart from Ukraine. They're continually stalling, and they're not doing anything at this point. The same thing that we're seeing in other areas with peace deals. We understand that the U.S. is going to have the largest drill in South Korea. Now, this was and still is being used to provoke North Korea and also to have North Korea do something. So we see North Korea, right, is saying that, listen, if you have this gigantic drill in South Korea, we're going to have a drill of our own called a preventative op. This is what the United States wants. They want to show North Korea putting together its military, saying that they might be attacking. Now, of course, the U.S. is going to leave out the part that they're having drills, and they're going to demonize North Korea. This is how the bully works. They poke, they poke, they poke, until the country does something. We see the U.S. is getting permission from Italy. Italian Defense Minister Roberta Pinotti announced Rome had agreed that U.S. forces will be able to use their Air Force base in Sicily to launch drone strikes against the Islamic State in Libya. So we see all the pieces are coming together. They're getting prepared and ready to go into Libya. We see more information has come out that Turkey is cooperating with the Islamic State on the border. There is telephone calls that have been recorded, and they have shown from the transcript that the Turkish military and the Islamic State fighters operating on the Syrian-Turkish border have been talking to each other. And it revealed that the Islamic State leader on the border received money from smugglers at the border and cooperated with officers and they were allowed to cross back and forth, which this is just more proof that Turkey is part of the Islamic State. And who controls Turkey and the Islamic State? The United States. Now, the Syrian army has made huge amount of gains in Aleppo. The Tiger forces entered and imposed full control over many different villages within Aleppo. And they have captured large, previously held pockets by the Islamic State. And they have basically secured a safe pathway for the government supplies from Aleppo from their airbase. So we can see right now things are falling apart for the United States government, for Turkey, and this is why they wanted the ceasefire. So let's break down the ceasefire a little bit here. The ceasefire will become official at midnight. This is going to be in Damascus time on Saturday, February 27th at 2200 hours. Those who subscribe to the agreement have publicly declared that they will basically stop all hostilities by a deadline 12 hours before the ceasefire comes into effect, and they will inform the White House and the Kremlin. Who does this apply to? Well, it applies to the rebels, the moderate rebels. Now, again, we don't have the list. Russia was continually asking the United States for the list of who are the terrorists, who are the moderate rebels, and no list was given. So those groups that are excluded from all this are the Islamic State, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, and any other terrorist organization designated by the UN Security Council. So we can see right now the moderate opposition, factions and the Kurds, will have to take it upon themselves to put down their arms, or they'll face the consequences, whatever those might be. Now, we can see that participants are obligated to cease any attacks, including rockets, mortars, anti-tank guided missiles, refrain from acquiring or seeking to acquire territory from other parties during the ceasefire. And we see there's a hotline that was put into place directly to contact Moscow or Washington. And we see right now that Moscow and Washington set up a task force that will kind of monitor all of this. But the problem with all this, again, is where are the moderates? Where are the terrorist groups? Because we know they're all one and the same. And if the moderates are mixed in with the terrorist groups, this allows the U.S. to say this is off limits. So, or Russia can say, well, this is the al-Nusra group. I'm sorry, but the rebels were there. We're firing at the al-Nusra group. The rebels need to get out of this area. So we're going to have a problem straight off the bat. The Syrian government right now, they have accepted the terms of the ceasefire. So this gap in this ceasefire is not going to help the situation whatsoever. Because we know that Russia and the Syrian forces are going to continually go after these terrorist groups, and the U.S. can't do anything about it. The only thing they can do is blame Russia and Syria for hitting the moderate rebels and saying the ceasefire is off, and they can blame Russia and Syria. So we can see at this point the U.S. is kind of backed into a corner. Russia, Syria dictated the terms, and the U.S. had to go along with this. They went along with this to try to buy some time. They tried to stall the inevitable of Aleppo falling. But don't worry. John Kerry is out there, and they're saying that they have a plan B if these peace talks fail. I don't even know if it's plan B, because we've been through so many plans already. This might even be plan X at this point. So what is this plan? We mentioned this before in previous reports. John Kerry said they're going to make a move where they're going to partition Syria into two different land masses. One for Syria, for Assad, and the other one for the U.S. John Kerry said, If the ceasefire, which is due to start in the next few days, does not materialize, or a genuine shift to a transitional government has not occurred in the next few months, where there's going to be another election in April, guess what? It may be too late to keep Syria as a whole. We might have to partition it. So this is their next plan, and we know why they want to do this. Because they can take Syria and separate and say this is the Kurdish section. Because we know throughout the Middle East what they want to do here is they want to separate the Middle East into Kurds, Shia, and Sunni. And this is the first step. And if they do this, they can partition it in a certain area where it allows them to build that pipeline they want to build. Now the question is, how are they going to do this? How are they going to say to Russia, okay, the ceasefire didn't work out, sorry Assad, this is our land now? Are they going to use a ground force? Are they going to use a false flag to get the ground force in there? So at this point, it looks like the U.S. does not want peace. They don't want a ceasefire. They're buying time right now. They're coming up with additional plans. All throughout the past years, they never wanted peace. Their goal was always the same. Assad must step down. We need a puppet government. And even if they get the partition, let's say they succeeded in this without creating a war, they're going to go after Assad no matter what. Now, I don't think Russia is going to allow this. I don't think Assad is going to say okay to this. And there's going to be multiple plans. We already see Saudi Arabia, the Saudi foreign minister, saying, we might have to supply the rebels with surface-to-air missiles so the rebels can defend themselves against Russian air attacks. So basically what they're saying is, we're going to give the rebels air-to-surface missiles to shoot down Russian planes. So we can see where this is headed. We can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to coax Russia into this battle. They're trying to show that Russia is going to start it, because they're not going to say, oh, look, they shot, the Syrian rebels shot down the Russian plane. They're going to use the other story that Russia started firing on the moderate rebels. And they're going to try to push war. And we can see, no matter which way they come at this, they still need the excuse to go into Syria to do whatever they're going to do. And they're going to need some type of an event. And this is a situation we're going to have to watch very, very carefully. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.